Good evening. Everyone hear me okay? Wonderful. Thank you all for coming. This is the final concert in the Mary Quick Jones concert series. Now, a little bit about this concert series for maybe some new people. I started this last year in November. I've been doing monthly concerts, and this is the final one. So we've gone the full 12, and I need a break. So this is the end. It doesn't mean that I'll still be performing again in the future, but for this project, it's come now to its conclusion, and I'll be looking to new things in the future. For this concert this evening, we always are free to attend. Same is true tonight. Today, donations will go 100% to Rama Worldwide. Rama Worldwide is an international humanitarian aid organization. They do essential work all over the globe. Food, building homes, sponsoring orphans. One of their most critical missions is volunteer medical work in conflict zones. So they've sent doctors into Ukraine, they've sent doctors to Gaza, they've sent doctors now to Lebanon. And a little bit in a moment, I'll be playing a little voice clip from one of the volunteer nurses from Rama Worldwide. And I think what he has to say will get to the point much more than anything I could say. I think I have a few acknowledgments I need to make. First, to Rio Rancho Presbyterian Church, thank you all so much, the people who come and support this concert series. Thank you to the church structure as a whole, because this is what has allowed the concert to happen, given us a location, given us the ability to process donations. It's really been a great blessing, and I can't imagine this project would have played out anything like the way it has without the support of the people in this congregation. So thank you very much. Give yourselves a round of applause. Yes. Next, I want to thank the amazing and always reliable Riley Bushma. She's been here helping me record these concerts every step of the way from the beginning. And the recordings, I don't know if anyone has listened to the recordings, but they're always really, really nice. So I'm very lucky to be able to have these great recordings of this project, and now into the future, I'll always be able to look back on it and listen to the pieces I performed. Lastly, I want to thank my family, my mother, my dad, my sister, and her new husband. They just got married last week. And of course, generally to all of you, to all of my friends for coming and supporting. Okay, I'm going to play this audio clip now. I want to give a brief warning. It is a little bit disturbing. He's a critical care nurse, and he was in Gaza for about 3 weeks. It's not very long, it's a few minutes. I'm going to play a brief little introduction. This is from a larger radio interview. It's about an hour and a half long, and I'm only going to play a few minutes. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a introductory from the interviewer so that you have some context of the question, and then it will be from there the nurse. So this nurse's name is Willie Massey. He's a critical nurse from Omaha, Nebraska, and he volunteered in Gaza. He was there through the first few weeks of September and came back at the end of September. Give me just a few moments to make sure everything is set up, and then I will play it for you.
trip into Gaza, and then what surprised you most about it when you finally arrived?
I will start with my what surprised me the most. You know, we have seen the destruction on social media. Mm-hmm. We have seen decapitated children after Israeli bombing. But what surprised me the most was the level of destruction in Gaza. There is no Gaza. It's flat. It has been flattened by the Israeli forces. Every building, every bridge, every water system, everything is rubble. That's number one. Number two, to see the children on social media with missing limbs and heads after they have been bombed by the Israeli airstrikes is one thing. But seeing it in person, holding a child, one child is too many when I arrived, that I'm trying to put their brain back into their skull. Mm-hmm. One is too many. I was heartbroken because this little girl, her name was Seba, was my first child. She was only 2. She came in bleeding heavily, but I saw in her head this brain matter is out. I'm trying to put it back in and stop the bleeding, but it was a very difficult fight for her life. And what I'm thinking in my mind was, I'm sorry, I paid for these bombs. And this is after an Israeli had struck, a residential building and tent area. There is no comparison of what seeing it on social media and what is happening in person. And I'm pushing her brains back in, I'm praying for her, and all of a sudden, I realized that I paid for this. Mm-hmm. We paid for it. So that was a very, very difficult day, and I thought she would be the only one, and the last one, as I said, one is too many. But unfortunately, only in Gaza, that kids coming to the emergency room with missing limbs and their brain matters out, or with gunshot wounds to the chest or to the head. One is too many, but there was a lot, hundreds after that.
So I will leave it there. I think it speaks for itself. Okay, moving on. I want to reiterate some things from my very first concert. So I'm going to read what my mother wrote about my grandmother, Mary Elizabeth Carlson Quick Jones. Mary was born in Kansas City on September 23, 1921. At home, she was only allowed to play church music on the piano, but if everyone was out of the house, she delighted in bringing out Gershwin and other show tunes that she loved. Mary attended Trinity Lutheran College of Nursing. In fact, she was in New York ready to ship out when World War II ended. Mary met and married Lyman Quick in 1946. He went to school on the GI Bill and became a pharmacist. They settled in Santa Fe, New Mexico in 1950 and began raising their children, Michael, Jennifer, and Lance. Jennifer remembers that their home was always filled with music. She would sneak down the hall to spy on her parents' parties and hear someone call, "Mary, play Around the World in 80 Days." Sadly, Lyman passed of an untimely heart attack in 1968. Mary was left as a single mom, and the music fell silent for a few years. She married Byron B. Jones in 1973, and when he found out that she could play the piano, he introduced her to fake books, and the music resumed. Nathan grew up participating in sing-alongs and music recitals, including Everyone. Mary insisted that all 8 grandchildren have a piano, and she paid for lessons. Out of all of them, only Nathan pursued the piano. She was so proud of him, and she always believed that he would be a terrific musician. Mary passed away in 2013, at the age of 92. She had a lifelong love of music, and she is smiling right now. Okay, now that I've collected myself, I want to talk a little bit about the music. So I'm very excited to be presenting this program tonight. I think of all my programs, this is the one I put the most effort into in just thinking about and putting it all together. So some of these pieces are just some of the best that has ever been composed. Speaking of, Rachmaninoff's Opus 3, Morceaux de Fantaisie, Fantasy Pieces, was published in 1892. Now this title of fantasy refers to the imagery that inspired the pieces rather than its form. So you compare to like Chopin fantasy or Mozart fantasy, that is talking about the structure of the music, and this is talking about the imagery and the inspiration behind the music and fantasy pieces. Perhaps most famous among this set, it's a set of 5 pieces which he dedicated to his composition teacher. Number 2 is the famous C-sharp minor prelude, which was requested so many times that Rachmaninoff became sick of it, that he hated it and never wanted to play it again. I will not be playing the prelude, but instead I will be playing Opus 3, number 1, the elegy. An elegy is a poem or a song in lament for the dead. The word comes from Greek, going to elegiac couplets, which is a type of poetry. We see some of the earliest music we have in human history, such as the Epitaph of Sekulos, is Greek elegy music that was meant to be set to the lyre. Now, I want you to keep this motif of the lyre in mind because it's going to return later on in some interesting ways. But this instrument has long been considered throughout history to be among the most beautiful and romantic of instruments, and in particular, it was used to accompany elegies and prayers, poems for the dead. Now, in the spirit of the elegy, I am going to ask we do something a little different. When I'm done with the piece, instead of applause, I want us to just take a moment of silence, and we will lift up prayers to those who have passed. Thank you. Okay. The next piece on the program, a little bit of a callback to one of the previous concerts. I did a concert with all video game composers, and so we have the return of the video game composer. Although not only video games, because he also composed for film and television. Some of you might know the A-Team or Magnum P.I. He's the composer for these television shows. But he also was the composer for the very excellent game BioShock. Give you a little bit of a backstory about this game. So BioShock, this is a game that's set in the underwater city of Rapture. And Rapture was constructed as a kind of Ayn Randian utopia. So its focus is on a society of radical individualism where the free market is worshipped above all else. And what's so interesting about this game is that as the protagonist, when you arrive, you come to the city some decades after it's been established and the people have gone underwater, and you find it in a state of horrific decay and destruction. Everybody has gone insane, and part of this, it's sort of this inversion of the Randian utopia. It has become the Randian dystopia because every aspect of life has become commodified. And in this place, this very it's kind of a spooky horror game in a way. It's not totally that, but it has this kind of a vibe to it. You're exploring a kind of dangerous, unknown place full of really crazy people. And one of these crazy people you run into is the deranged artist and composer Sander Cohen. You first encounter Sander Cohen in a theater where he's torturing the young Kyle Fitzpatrick. He has him chained by the leg to the piano, and he forces him to play his music. And the piano is rigged with dynamite to explode. If he makes too many mistakes, the piano will explode, and that will be the end of Kyle Fitzpatrick. Now, this piece is really, really fun. It's a very excellently constructed piece, I think, compositionally. It really captures the sense of the unhinged, of the mad, through use of dissonances, extensive use of diminished chords, and in particular, the augmented chord, the mad scientist. It has a little bit of a crazy ring to it. So diminished on augmented chords all over the place. Another excellent technique he uses is this unevenness of the right hand arpeggios. So you'll hear there's many parts where the right hand kind of da 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 da, some arpeggios. But they're not just consistent up and down arpeggios. He always kind of varies a little bit, throws in a jump here and there, changes up the pattern just a little bit to keep you on your toes. And I think this is really some excellent text painting that gives some characterization through the music. Yeah, this is a piece I've been working on since I was a young kid, middle school probably. I started to try to play this, and now I'm so excited to finally be playing it for you today. So Gary Scheinman's Cohen's masterpiece. And now I'm very pleased and excited to bring back my friend Mitzy Sotelo. Any of you who are here for the second concert in the series have heard her sing already, but now you're going to get to hear her sing some more. All right. So I have some notes for you on this piece. Erlkönig, Opus 1 by Schubert, is an 1815 setting of Johann Wolfgang von Goethe's poem of the same name. A little bit about the story here. You can read the lyrics and you'll get a sense, but a father is riding desperately through the forest with his young son in his arms, and they are beset upon by a natural being, a supernatural being, the Erlkönig. At first, the Erlkönig coaxes the boy, promising him royal treatment, that he will have his daughters wait on him, sing and dance for him. The father tries to comfort his child, telling him that it is only the mist moving against the trees and the leaves rustling in the branches. At last, the Erlkönig becomes impatient and seizes the boy by force. When the father finally emerges from the forest to his destination, he looks to find his son dead in his arms. I think this is kind of my own personal theory about this, but I get the sense that this is a story about a sick child, a child who is ill with disease. And part of the reason I think that is because right from the beginning, the father is writing desperately. So before the Erlkönig even comes, he's already writing on some urgent mission. So what is he writing to, and why is his son with him? It seems clear to me he's taking his son, trying to get help for him, for he's sick. During this period, it was very common for children to die at early ages, pneumonia, cholera, smallpox, and just a lack of understanding of germ theory. In fact, in many cultures, it was common not to name children right when they were born, but rather to wait a few years until you were sure that they were going to live. Now, I have some interesting linguistic notes here about the word Erlkönig. I didn't expect to find this, but this is a kind of a reference. Typically, this is meant to be understood as a reference to the Danish folklore of the elf king. This is kind of a forest spirit. He's sort of malicious and evil. But what is really interesting here is that it comes from this Danish, now I'm sorry, the Danish pronunciation, I don't know if it's correct, but Elkunge, which means directly elf king. But Goethe specifically uses this word Erl, which means alder in German. So alder is in the European black alder. And he's very specific about this because the setting is an alder forest, forest of black alder in the Saale River Valley. So he has a specific location intended and atmosphere that he means to create. But it's very interesting because the German would be Elbekönig or Elfenkönig, but he doesn't use this. He uses the Erlkönig. So it's not the elf king, but the tree king, the king of the forest. So a couple other things I want to mention about this musically. Schubert is expert text painter, and he uses many of these techniques in all of his songs, but this one in particular is very impressive. The piano has these relentless staccato triplets. They keep going through the whole thing. And this is a representation of the pounding of the horse's hooves driving ever forward through the forest. The vocalist has a particularly challenging job in this piece because the vocalist must embody 4 different characters. The narrator, who provides a framing device at the beginning and the end, the father, the son, and of course, the Erlkönig. Schubert uses motivic ideas to represent these characters. In particular, the father and son have motives directly associated with that character. The Erlkönig itself is always presented, interestingly, with major chords and in this piano dynamic, even though the piece is a minor key. It's a minor key of G minor original, we'll be singing in E minor. But it's really pretty loud at the beginning and the end, but the Erlkönig always comes in silence and in the major key. So there's something kind of eerie and uncanny about the use of Schubert's major in this minor key piece here. All right, I think that's all I have to say about it. So without further ado, Erlkönig, Opus 1.
reitet so spät durch Nacht und Wind. Es ist der Vater mit seinem Kind. Hat den Knaben wohl in dem Arm. Fasst ihn sicher, hält ihn warm. Mein Sohn, was biegst du so bang dein Gesicht? Siehst, Vater, du den Elken nicht, den Elken mit Kron und Schweif. Mein Sohn, es ist ein Nebelstreif. Du liebes Kind, komm, geh mit mir, gar schöne Spiele spiel ich mit dir. Mach bunte Blumen sind an dem Strand, meine Mutter hat noch gülden Gewand. Mein Vater, und hörest du nicht, was Ellenkönig mir leise verspricht? Sei ruhig, bleibe ruhig, mein Kind, in dürren Blättern säuselt der Wind. Jetzt, kleiner Knabe, du mit mir gehen, meine Töchter sollen die warten schön, meine Töchter führen die Nachrichten rein und wiegen und tanzen und singen dich ein. Sie wiegen und tanzen und singen dich ein. Mein Vater, und siehst du nicht dort, Elkönig Töchter an diesen Ort? Mein Sohn, ich seh's genau, es scheinen die alten Weiden so grau. Ich liebe dich, mich reizt deine schöne Gestalt. Du bist du nicht willig, so brauch ich Gewalt. Mein Vater, jetzt fasst mich an. Der König hat mir alleins getan. Dem Vater grauset's, reitet geschwind, hält in Armen, was ich sende, Kind. Reizt den Hof mit Mühe und Not. In seinem Armen das Kind war tot.
Fabulous, Mitzy. Thank you so much. Okay. I'm going to need a bit of water. One moment. Okay. So, the next piece on the program, Night on Bald Mountain, also known as Night on the Bear Mountain. Alternate titles mean the same thing, basically, by Russian composer Modest Mussorgsky. This is what's called a tone poem, or it's sort of a musical picture, and what it is depicting is a witch's Sabbath on the night of St. John's Eve. It's based on a short story by Nikolai Gogol of the same name, St. John's Eve. Now, this story specifically references a place, a specific bald mountain, and that is Lysa Hura in Kiev, Ukraine. If you look in your program, there's an insert with some pictures, and I've included a picture of Lysa Hura there for you to see. Now, you're going to have to forgive me here. I have a little bit of a historical digression, and it may seem a little tangential, but I promise it will reconnect back to this piece in an amazing way. And I went down such a rabbit hole with this, and I couldn't believe the way it just wrapped back around to the piece, so I couldn't resist it. So I want to talk historically a little bit about St. John's Eve. So what is St. John's Eve? Of course, the eve of St. John the Baptist's feast day. Now, this feast day was established in the 4th century by the Roman Catholic Church. And what's very interesting about this is that it happens to coincide with the Roman solstice holidays, which were basically big festivals that were practiced in polytheistic Rome. And once the Roman Empire converted to Christianity, there was a process of sort of rethinking about what we're going to do with all of our polytheistic traditions and holidays. And so St. John's Eve is heavily connected here to the Midsummer Festival, or the summer solstice. And one thing that I think that's very thematic of this and shows a connection is that of bonfires. So bonfires is something that we find throughout ancient cultures in solstice festivals, going back to early pre-civilization, before we had really settled cities even. And even ancient sites like Stonehenge, for example, there's evidence that it was constructed to align with the solstices. And so that there are certain celestial events that occur and happen to line up perfectly with Stonehenge. Now, there's a theme here, which is that the early Christianization of polytheistic cultures, a sort of process of religious and cultural assimilation that occurs. And this theme is going to recur in a way that you wouldn't expect. Now, when I first read about this, I hadn't really known too much about St. John's Eve, but what it immediately reminded me of was Walpurgisnacht, which I'm familiar with through Goethe's Faust. So Walpurgisnacht, a very similar situation where it is an ancient polytheistic holiday, that of May Day, falls on the 1st of May, and it also is connected because it was also replaced by a Catholic feast day, that of the Feast of St. Walpurga. Now, this comes a little later than the Feast of St. John, which was established in the 4th century. The Feast of St. Walpurga wasn't established until the 9th century, so we're talking about Roman period versus medieval period here. So there's definitely differences there, and it's not totally connected. This idea of the Walpurgisnacht in Faust, the demon that tempts him, Mephistopheles, takes Faust on the eve of St. Walpurga's feast day to the witch's Sabbath on Walpurgisnacht, which occurs atop a bald mountain. So again, we have a very direct connection there to St. John's Eve. Now, when I first encountered this piece of music, it was through a movie, Disney's Fantasia. I saw it when I was a very little kid, and this is at the very end it occurs, and it scared me. It was very startling imagery, I have to say. Now, when I was researching this, I found, okay, so Disney, the witch's Sabbath is presided over by Satan himself. But Disney didn't want to depict Satan, especially this film was in the 1940s, so they had sensitive audiences. And so instead, they used a replacement Chernobog, which is the Slavic god of evil. And here is where this connection loops back around on itself in a way I wasn't expecting. So I give you a picture as well of the Disney Chernobog. But when I was reading into this about the Slavic god, Chernobog and his brother Belobog, that is directly translating to the black god and the white god, of the evil god and the good god. And as soon as I looked and started to do some research on this, I found historians saying these deities are not part of Slavic mythology. We look all over the place and we don't find reference to them. And then I did a little more digging, and I found that, in fact, the only reference that exists to Chernobog and Belobog comes from Chronica Slavorum by the 12th century Saxon priest Helmold. And this occurs nearly 200 years post-Christianization of these Slavic regions. So it's very possible that either Helmold was just making stuff up and he didn't understand the Slavic peoples and their religion, or this was some kind of a conscious effort to place a Christian framework onto their mythology. And I think it's very clear to see this idea of the black and the white, of good and evil, is a very fundamental Christian framework here. And much of the historians I talked about found that Slavic mythology is not so much like that, and it's really much more similar to the Greek mythology, where the gods are multifaceted and kind of flawed in their own ways, and they're very human in a certain sense. And this is more what we see with the Slavic mythology. So I found this incredibly interesting. I didn't think I would find this loop around connection between early Christianization of St. John's Eve, Walpurgisnacht, and yet through Disney and Chernobog and the Chronicum Slavorum. So I'm sorry for the historical digression, but I just couldn't help myself. I found it too interesting. I want to move on now to the composer. So Modest Mussorgsky. This is a composer I think that doesn't get talked about as much as maybe he should. Originally not a composer by background, did not study in music schools or have a classical training. He was a soldier by background, a member of the Tsarist imperial military. But he was also a member of what's called the Russian Mighty Five, which is a group of composers which had a goal to create a national Russian identity to music. They felt that too much the classical music tradition was driven by Western German composers, Handel, Bach, Beethoven, and they wanted to create something uniquely Russian in their sound and character. And so that was sort of the goal of this group here. Now, this includes their teacher, Mily Balakarev, Cesar Cui, Alexander Borodin, Mussorgsky, and Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov. Now, Mussorgsky, this piece, Night on Bald Mountain, this is something that he started when he was young and worked on it really through his whole life and died before it ever saw full completion. So the first version of this piece he wrote when he was 28, and he presented it to his teacher, Mily Balakarev, who hated it, tore it to pieces, told him it was awful, and sent him away to work on it. There's some lost works. Apparently it was used in a ballet, but we have no score or record of this ballet, so who knows. The next time we see it appear in the music record is in the opera Sorochinsky Fair, which is a libretto by Nikolai Gogol, the same author of the St. John's Eve short story. Now this opera premiered in 1913, so this is 35 years after he died that it was finally premiered. And 5 years after he died in 1881, and in 1886, his good friend Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov did an arrangement, a sort of final arrangement of this piece, where he took the original work and combined things from some of the other times he used it, such as the Sorochinsky Fair. So it includes two themes that he borrows from Sorochinsky Fair, and they're absolutely critical. One is this little neighbor tone, which you will hear that a lot. And Rimsky-Korsakov uses this to expert effect to create connection throughout the piece, which is something that Mussorgsky was criticized by his teacher early. Your piece is too disjunct. It doesn't flow in a way that goes together. But Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov is one of the greatest arrangers and orchestrators in history, and he just expertly takes this very simple little theme, and it totally transforms the work. He also includes an ending theme from Sorochinsky Fair, which is the shepherd falling asleep. Now he uses this at the end of the piece as the sunrise. So at the beginning, it is nightfall, and the witch's Sabbath begins, and at the end of the piece, you hear the chimes of the bell and sun rises, and this just gorgeous, beautiful melody at the end. It is truly amazing. So, yes, what I'll be playing here today is the Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov arrangement, but it's transcribed for piano by Chernow. So, without further ado, Night on Bald Mountain by Mussorgsky. Okay. And now I will invite Mitzy to come back up, and we will sing a couple more songs. Now these are two songs by the American composer, singer-songwriter, mathematician, satirist Tom Lehrer. Now, for those who may not be familiar with Tom Lehrer, he's a very interesting guy. He had a long career. He composed many songs, and he just has, his comedic timing is perfect, and he has just the most cutting wit, and the way he writes his lyrics and everything. It's just, he's a rare kind of guy. His style of writing is what I would call darkly comic. He kind of veers into this territory that crosses the boundary between the grotesque and the comical. One thing he's particularly known for a lot is his sort of political satire and commentary, especially around nuclear weapons and nuclear proliferation. So he wrote a number of satirical songs about this, such as "We Will All Go Together When We Go," or "So Long, Mom, I'm Off to Drop the Bomb." And this connection we want to keep in mind between the humorous and the macabre. I think it's something that is just essential to both humor and to horror. And when you have the perfect blend of the two, it's just amazing. And it will come back in a minute as well. I'm going to talk more about how this theme recurs later. But for now, two songs by Tom Lehrer, "Poisoning Pigeons in the Park" and "I Hold Your Hand in Mine."
Spring is here, a spring is here. Life is Skittles and life is beer. I think the loveliest time of the year is the spring. I do, don't you? Of course you do. But there's one thing that makes spring complete for me, and makes every Sunday a treat for me. All the world sings in tune on a spring afternoon as we poison the pigeons in the park. Every Sunday you'll see my sweetheart and me as we poison the pigeons in the park. When they see us coming, the birdies will try and hide, but they still go for peanuts when coated with cyanide. My sun shining bright, everything seems alright as we poison the pigeons in the park. We've gained notoriety and caused much anxiety in the Audubon Society with our games. They call it impiety and lack of propriety and quite a variety of unpleasant names. But it's not against any religion to want to dispose of a pigeon. So if Sunday you're free, why don't you come with me and we'll poison the pigeons in the park? And maybe we'll do in a squirrel or two as we poison the pigeons in the park. We'll murder them all amid laughter and merriment, except for the few we take home to experiment. My pulse will be quickening with each drop of strychnine we feed to a pigeon. It just takes a smidgen to poison a pigeon in the park. I need a hand for this one. There you go. Thank you. died, I cut it off. I really don't know why. But for now, each time I kiss it, I get bloodstains on my tie. I'm sorry now I killed you, for our love was something fine. Until they come to get me, I shall hold your hand in mine.
Thank you, Mitzy. That was so much fun. Okay. All right. Now we come to the monster of the program here. I get my notes right. Aha. Danse Macabre, Opus 40. This is a symphonic poem, 1874 by French composer Camille Saint-Saëns. It's inspired by a poem of Henry Kali, and the poem is kind of funny. It has a little bit of this comic element. He uses this sort of metrical verse, zigget zigget zag, zigget zigget zoom, and it's the dancing of the skeletons. Now, Danse Macabre, this is not just a piece of music, but it's a historical motif, and it goes back, like in many cases with music, it is visual art that precedes music in its exploration of ideas and themes. And so it is with the Danse Macabre that we first see it as visual art. So this is connected back into the medieval idea of memento mori, to remember one's own death, one's own finality, from the Buddhist Sutra. Of all contemplations, the thought of impermanence is supreme. So this Danse Macabre, I have a little picture. Now, this is only one. This is a series of woodcuts. There's like 60 of them. And they each depict different people in different levels of society. So there's the king and the pope and the beggar and the musician and the court jester and all of these various people being invited to join in the dance of death. And this is by Guy Marchand in 1585. And what he is depicting here comes from a fresco, which was on the Cimetière des Saints Innocents, which is in Paris. And the fresco, the church, it's no longer there, I think. Maybe some parts of the building, but the fresco is lost. We don't know what it looked like. And the closest thing we have is Guy Marchand's woodcuts. But this fresco was in the middle of a popular public area in Paris. And it had what was called a charnel house. Now, this is something that you see all over medieval Europe, but particularly in France and in Paris. They had a big problem during the plague with overcrowded cemeteries, where there was more bodies than they could possibly bury in the cemeteries. And so what they started to do is they took this practice of exhuming the old corpses and gathering up the bones into a charnel house, and then they would have more room to bury recently deceased people. And so you can imagine this big public area, the huge church, and you could see the entire wall filled, stacked to the ceiling with the bones of those who had been exhumed from the cemetery, and this fresco all the way along the wall of the Dance of Death, a constant daily reminder for those. Now, this artistic motif of the Dance of Death, this is kind of the first time that we see death embodied in the form of a skeleton, right? This is something that's always like clearly related to death, but this is the first time in this era where we start to see it as like an allegorical tool to represent something more than just the skeleton, but actually of, the Grim Reaper, or of the concept of death that comes for us all. Now, I want to talk a bit about the music here. He uses extensive use of the tritone, which in the medieval period was known as diabolos in musica, the devil in music. And the church forbid the use of this interval because it was considered to be unholy. And Yeah, and so here he invokes this to great effect, and it's all over the place in this piece, the tritone. Some other techniques he uses, the 12 tolls of midnight. The piece begins with the church chiming the 12 tolls of midnight, and then in the morning, at the end of the piece, when the sun rises, you will hear the cocks crow to signal the end of the night. There's also, it's a little hard to hear, I think, unless you are super familiar, but the theme of the Dies Irae Requiem, the Mass for the Dead, is sort of hidden there amongst the music material. Okay, I want to leave you with one little bit of a literary reference of the Dance of the Dead that I was not prepared to learn about it. I was disturbed by this. It comes from Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. If anybody knows the Lobster Quadrille or the Mock Turtle Song, now it's accompanied by dance, and this is intended as a direct reference to the Danse Macabre. It's about a snail, said a whiting to a snail and the creatures of the ocean. And there's a line about, we're in England and across the channel there is France. And so the implication is that the snail in France will be eaten as escargot. So yeah, his poetry there. Pale not, beloved snail, will you come and join the dance? Will you, won't you? Will you, won't you? Will you join the dance? Okay, and now we have a guest performer, a surprise guest, my mother, Jennifer Seacrest. Now,
No pressure.
we, as I said at the beginning, family sing-alongs were mandatory when Grandma was around. There was no escaping it, no matter how much you didn't want to. And my mother has carried on that tradition with me, and so here we are today. I've included in your program, if you look, it's all the way near in the back insert,
I need your help
the
out
music.
there.
So in the spirit, everyone may sing along. You have the music, you have the lyrics, and feel free to join in if you want to. You don't have to use it, just stand in front of it.
Like this? Mitzy. Yeah, he's right. Nobody could escape, so I don't want to see anybody sneak into the bathroom. Now we're going to sing the first two lyrics, Carolina Moon. We'll go back to Carolina Moon, the second verse, and then finish with the ending. And it was always about gusto and enthusiasm, not about whether you could sing or not. So let's hope everybody can help me out here. All right, get a little intro. Carolina moon, keep shining, shining on the one who waits for me. Carolina moon, I'm pining for the place I long to be. How I'm hoping tonight you'll go to the right window, scatter your light, say I'm alright, please do. Tell her that I'm blue and lonely, dreaming Carolina. Oh, very good, very good. Bravo.
Okay, I think this piece will be very well known to people. This is one of Chopin's most famous pieces, and also one of his most beautiful. This comes from his second sonata in B-flat minor, opus 35, 4 movements. And when I first started the series, I wanted to play the whole thing for this concert. And as I got closer and all this other music, I realized there's no way. So instead, you will just hear the third movement, the funeral march. And this piece was composed in 1940 during Chopin's period in Nohant in Paris. Now, you might have heard me talk about this before if I talk about other Chopin pieces. This period was about 2 to 3 years that he spent in Nohant in Paris, and it was incredibly fruitful for him as an artist. He found great peace there, and he was able to produce so many masterpieces. You can't believe that a person could write this many in that much of a compressed time span. Almost all of his ballades composed during this period, Polonaise Fantasy, Polonaise in F sharp minor, Polonaise in A flat major, this sonata, so many others. So I have a quote from Liszt here about this piece. It's of such penetrating sweetness that we can scarcely deem it of this earth. And now we've come to the end. So I will be singing a song from the end of Schubert's Winterreise, Der Leiermann. Now I want to talk a little bit about Winterreise. Those who were here for my concert with the amazing Julianne Wolf heard some about Schubert and Winterreise, but I want to reiterate, because I really, Schubert, I think, of all composers, I connect so much with his poetic sensibilities. He had such a soft-hearted soul, and he writes so beautifully. So, his words make me cry. I will have to keep myself together. Now, Schubert, we all know, I think, Franz Schubert. The cycle Winterreise was Opus 89, so this is a later work of Schubert's, a cycle of 24 songs based on the poetry of Wilhelm Müller. Now, Schubert discovered this poetry at a time where he was early diagnosed with syphilis. And he had to be treated for syphilis with mercury at an asylum, and that was not fun for him. But the whole thing with syphilis at the time, you could treat it, but you'd be poisoned by the mercury, and ultimately it's a terminal disease. So he had to come to face his own death at a very young age, and I think he struggled in a lot of ways with it, and to me, Winterreise is his ultimate coming to terms with that of his own death and to face it head on. So his good friend Franz von Schober was the host of Schubertiade, which is these very famous concerts that were held at his house, where him, other artists, people would perform, gather, have food, and share in music. And so this comes from the memoirs of his friend Josef von Spaun, talking about the premiere of Winterreise. For some time, Schubert appeared very quiet, very upset and melancholy. When asked what was troubling him, he would only say, "Soon you will hear and understand." One day he said to me, "Come over to Schober's today, and I will sing you a cycle of horrifying songs. I am anxious to know what you will say about them, for they have cost me more effort than any of my other songs." So he sung to us the entire winter's journey through in a voice full of emotion, and we were utterly dumbfounded by these mournful, gloomy pieces. And Schober, the rascal of the group, said that only one, the Linden Tree, had appealed to him. To this, Schubert replied, "I like these songs more than all the rest, and you will come to like them too." At the end of his life, Schubert wrote a number of very poignant poetic things about coming to terms with his death. In 1823, he wrote the poem My Prayer, where he begs to God for release from the physical pain of his syphilis. And here's where I will cry reading this. So this is a letter that Schubert wrote to his good friend Leopold Kupelweisse, an Austrian painter. In a word, I feel myself to be the most unhappy and wretched creature in all the world. Imagine a man whose health will never be right again. Imagine a man, I say, to whose most brilliant hopes have come to naught, to whom the happiness of love and friendship have nothing to offer but pain at best. Well might I sing now each day, my peace is gone, my heart is sore, never shall I find peace again. For each night on retiring to bed, I hope never to wake again. I want to talk a little bit about Der Leiermann. Der Leiermann meaning the hurdy-gurdy man. Now, I want to just read you the English poem here, I think, get you a sense of what is happening. Now, in Winterreise, this is a kind of non-narrative story where we don't get much of character. Basically, my pages are all mixed up. Okay. We don't get much of character. It's just really one character, the wanderer. And we don't know much about him or what he's doing, but he is on a journey and he is going out, and the songs are just full of anger and frustration and sadness and bitterness. But there at the end, you're left with just the empty, hollow feeling. And he uses this metaphorical device of the hurdy-gurdy man. The hurdy-gurdy man is an aspect of death of the reaper. There behind the village stands a hurdy-gurdy man. With numb fingers, he plays as best he can. Barefoot on the ice, he staggers back and forth, and his little plate remains ever empty. No one wants to hear him. No one looks at him, and the hounds snarl at the old man. And he lets it all go by, everything as it will. He plays, his hurdy-gurdy is never still. Strange old man, shall I go with you? Will you play your hurdy-gurdy to my songs? Now here's where I bring back something I talked way back at the beginning. Do you remember the lyre? Now, there's something of a kind of a joke here that Schubert and that Wilhelm Müller are ultimately playing as well with this concept of the lyre. Instead of the most beautiful and romantic instrument to accompany the lament of the dead, he chooses the inversion, the dreh-lyre, the hurdy-gurdy, the most abhorrent, grinding, unpleasant sound you could imagine. And it's an old man, a beggar, who grinds his hurdy-gurdy away, and nobody wants to listen to it, nobody wants to hear it. And so there's something kind of ironic here with the way he chooses to end this piece and to use the hurdy-gurdy as this instrument here to represent things. Yeah, I think this is really all I have to say for it. I'm going to have some water, and then I need to get the mic set up so I can sing. And then that will be it. So Schubert's Der Leiermann. steht ihm nimmer still. Tretun seiner Leier steht ihm nimmer still. Wunderlicher Alter, soll ich mit dir gehen, willst du meinem Lieden eine Leier drehen? Thank you all so much for coming. There is some refreshments in the back, courtesy of Shirley Underwood and Laura Gonzalez. Thank you so much.
It's a thank you to Nathan for all of his work over the past year. We wanted to do a special thank you for him, so.
Absolutely fabulous.
Do a favorite piece. The Rachmaninoff at the beginning.